बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम डियर पेरेंट्स, स्टूडेंट्स एंड व्यूअर्स। आज हम इंतहाई एक अहम वीडियो के साथ आपके सामने फिर हाजिर हैं। इस वीडियो में हम बताने जा रहे हैं फेडरल बोर्ड के जो क्लास 10 की इंग्लिश का जो करिकुलम है या सिलेबस है उस बारे में। SLO बेस्ड पर जो सिलेबस बोर्ड वालों ने दिया है वो हम लेकर आपकी खिदमत में हाजिर हैं। तो आप हमारी वीडियो को एंड तक ज़रूर वॉच कीजिए ताकि आपको मुकम्मल मालूमात हासिल हो सके। और अगर आप हमारे चैनल पे नए हैं तो हमारे चैनल को प्लीज़ सब्सक्राइब कीजिए और साथ ही बेल आइकन भी दबा दीजिए ताकि इस तरह की मज़ीद आने वाले इंफॉर्मेटिव वीडियोस आप तक पहुंचती रहें। तो आए वीडियो में हम आगे बढ़ते हैं। बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। यहाँ से हम शुरू करते हैं अपनी वीडियो। तो स्टूडेंट लर्निंग आउटकम्स फॉर ग्रेड 10 की ये इंग्लिश है जिसका हम देखेंगे कि यहाँ पे जो SLO बेस जो सिलेबस है वो कैसा है। तो जैसे कि आप देख सकते हैं नीचे से स्टूडेंट लर्निंग आउटकम्स ग्रेड 10। पहला यहाँ पे एनालाइज पैसेजेस इन द टेक्स्ट टू आइडेंटिफाई द थीम, जनरल सब्जेक्ट, की आइडिया, सेंट्रल थॉट एंड सपोर्टिंग डिटेल्स। नेक्स्ट दिया हुआ है एनालाइज पैराग्राफ्स टू आइडेंटिफाई वर्ड्स, फ्रेजेस और sentences that support the main idea through definition, example, illustration, cause and effect, comparison and contrast, facts, analogies, anecdotes and quotations. Next दिया है identify and recognize the functions of pronoun, antecedent relationships, anaphoric and cataphoric references, transitional devices used for coherence and cohesion at discourse level. Next, you analyze the order of arranging paragraphs, chronological or spatial. Number 2 है general or to specific to general. Number 3 है most important to least important and vice versa. नेक्स्ट है बेंचमार्क 2। यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है एनालाइज कम्प्लेक्स प्रोसेसेस, प्रोसीजर, इवेंट, इश्यूज एंड वेरियस व्यू पॉइंट्स, अप्लाइंग रीडिंग कंप्रहेंशन एंड थिंकिंग स्ट्रेटजीज। स्टूडेंट लर्निंग आउटकम्स ग्रेड 10 है फिर, और यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है यूज प्री रीडिंग स्ट्रेटजीज टू predict the content of a text from topic, picture, title, headings, keywords and visual etc. By using prior knowledge, asking questions and contextual clues. Skim text to have general idea of the text, infer theme, main idea. और next है apply critical thinking to interact with text and use intensive reading strategies while reading to। यहाँ पे कुछ दिए हुए हैं, उनमें से पहला है scan to answer short questions, make simple inferences using context of the text and prior knowledge, or distinguish between what is clearly stated and what is implied, deduce meaning of difficult words from context, use context to infer missing words, read silently with comprehension and extract main idea and supporting details, scan to look at an option, distinguish fact from option in letters to editor, text supporting on opinion etc. Look at examples to support an opinion, for example a personal anecdote, questions, examples and analogy etc. Recognize arrangement of counter arguments and counter arguments, explore viewpoints, ideas and issues, follow instructions in maps or user instruction manual, and form related to extended social and academic environment. Comprehend, interpret text by applying critical thinking, generate questions to understand text, use summary skills to extract silent points and develop a mind map to summarize a text. Follow a process or procedure to summarize the information to transfer the written text to a diagram, flowchart, or closed paragraph. Use critical thinking to respond orally and in writing to the text to give a personal opinion and justify stance related to viewpoints, ideas, and issues in the text. Relate what is read to his or her own feelings and experiences. Explore causes and consequences of a problem or an issue and propose various solutions. Evaluate material read. Next, apply strategies to comprehend questions by making keywords, verbs, and tenses in a variety of question type: literal, textual, factual, interpretative, inferential, evaluative, personal response, open-ended, respond orally and in writing. Benchmark 3 है analyze information from a visual cue or a graphic organizer to show complex processes, procedures, comparisons, contrast, and cause and effect relationships. यहाँ पे पहला है interpret the situation in a visual cue and with the help of mind map, giving vocabulary, structure, and sensory details to write a short description. Next है analyze information in bar graph, line graph, and diagrams describing complex processes and procedures, comparison and contrast to write a short written report. Number 3 है organize information using various organizational patterns, sequence, comparison, contrast, classification, cause and effect. Number 4 है recognize and use appropriate transitional words within and beyond paragraphs for better coherence and cohesion. Or number 5 है recognize and use appropriate conventions, format, style, expression. Benchmark 4 है gather, analyze, evaluate and synthesize information to use for a variety of purposes including a research project using various arts and study skills. यहाँ पे जो चीज़ है वो है use dictionaries to locate guide words, locate interwords, choose appropriate word definitions, identify pronunciation through pronunciation key, identify syllable division and stress pattern, identify parts of speech, identify correct spellings, identify phrases through keywords, recognize abbreviations used in a dictionary, locate phrases and idioms, comprehend notes on usage, locate appropriate synonyms and antonyms in a thesaurus, use library skills to alphabetize book titles, words, and name, locate fiction and non-fiction books, books by subject, understand card catalog, locate and use card catalog, identify 3 kinds of catalog cards such that author card, title card, subject card, use case and shelves labels in the library, Use the reference section in the library. Use computer catalog. Utilize effective study strategies, for example, note taking, note making, writing a summary, and creating a mind map to organize idea. Use textual aids such as table of contents, footnote, glossary, preface, subheadings, etc. to comprehend text, identify and select relevant information in a book. Competency 1 रीडिंग एंड थिंकिंग स्किल स्टैंडर्ड 2 है यहाँ पे. All students will read and analyze literary text to seek information, ideas, enjoyment, and to relate their own experiences to those of common humanity as depicted in literature. Benchmark 1 है इसका. Analyze short stories, poems, and essays. Make connections between literary texts and their own lives. यहाँ पे जो लर्निंग आउटकम है उनमें पहला है read text to make predictions about storyline, content, characters using contextual clues and prior knowledge. Analyze story elements, characters, events, settings, plot, theme, tone, point of view. Identify the speaker or narrator in a selection. Recognize the author's purpose and point of view. Read a text to make connections between their own lives and the characters, event, motive, and causes of conflict in text. Make inferences and draw conclusions about character using appropriate supportive evidence from the text. Compare characters in a library selection to near similar ones in real life. Recognize genres of literature, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, legend, myth. Read a poem and give orally and in writing. Theme and its development. Personal response with justification. Preface, summary. Read and analyze how a writer poet uses language to appeal to the senses through use of figurative language, including smiles, similes, and metaphors. Affect meaning through use of synonyms with different connections and denotations. Create imagery. Read and recognize literary techniques such as repetition, personification, and alliteration. Competency 2 writing skill standard 1. All students will produce with developing fluency and accuracy, academic, transactional, and creative writing, which is focused, purposeful, and shows an insight into the writing process. Benchmark 1 है analyze a variety of written discourse to use in their own compositions. Techniques for effective text organization, development, and authors. Techniques that influence a reader. इसका जो हाँ इसका जो पहला है develop focus for own writing by identifying audience and purpose. Select and use a variety of pre-writing strategies such as brainstorming, mind mapping, outlining, etc. Analyze an essay to identify the general subject, main idea, a statement about the general subject, key ideas, supporting details, and transitional devices. Write an essay on a general subject. Write an introductory paragraph with a clear central thought. Provide key ideas which prove, explain, or support the central thought. Use a separate paragraph for each key idea. Incorporate evidence, facts, quotations, for example, analogies, anecdotes, etc., or different point of view to support each key idea. Use appropriate transitional devices to connect ideas within and between paragraphs. Add a closing or summary paragraph with a synthesis of central idea, synthesis of each supporting idea, a general concluding statement. Use correct convention of grammar and punctuation. Use appropriate vocabulary. Benchmark 2 है इसका. Write a variety of expository, persuasive, analytical essays and personal narratives for different purposes and audiences. इसका point number 1 है analyze to use in their own writing features of an expository composition showing comparison and contrast between things, events, situations, places, action, idea, or a problem. Methods for organizing comparison and contrast. Connectives of comparison and contrast. Similes and metaphors for comparison and contrast. Next point है write a personal narrative. Include choice of time period in one's life. Include clear statement of personality traits at that time. Include significant details and an incident used to portray personality. Next part है write a persuasive argumentative essay on a given topic. Distinguish fact from opinion. State an opinion on the topic. List ideas and arguments that support opinion. Organize ideas and supporting arguments in a clear, structured, and logical manner. Distinguish between language used for persuasion and propaganda. Use persuasive language to enhance ideas. Use special devices to support arguments. Next point है anticipate and respond to opposing arguments by defending point of view with factual evidence, quotations, expert opinion, logical reasoning, and commonly held beliefs. Analyze a simple example book review of a storybook to write one. Write a book review of a simple storybook. Write a summary of the book. Gather information about the author. Evaluate the plot, character, and setting. Prepare an outline for the book review. Write, revise, and proofread the review. Analyze questions to write effective and focused answer of required length. Mark keywords, identify verbs and tenses, recognize question types such as literal, textual, factual, interpretive, inferential, evaluative, personal response, open-ended. Use summary skill to write summary précis of simple passages, poems. Use paraphrasing skills to paraphrase stanzas. Mark thought groups in the stanza. Restate the message in simple prose. Replace poetic words with simple ones. Benchmark 3 है write expository, persuasive, analytical essays and personal narratives to produce a variety of academic and creative texts for various audiences. इसका जो पहला नंबर वो है write and revise formal letters to people in extended social and academic environment for various purposes. Write the address on the envelope clearly and in proper format. Analyze letters to editor to recognize effective ways of explaining and presenting an idea, a point, or an opinion. Write and revise letters to editor expressing ideas, points, or opinions by supporting it with anecdotes, questions, examples, analogies, etc. Write and revise letters to editor expressing ideas, points, or opinions by supporting it with anecdotes, questions, examples, analogies. Analyze and compare various formal emails to note differences of conventions, vocabulary, style, and tone. Write formal emails in extended social and academic environment. Analyze various forms currently required in extended social and academic environment. Fill in forms legibly, following instructions and supplying correct information. Benchmark 4 है इसका plan and draft their writing. Revise and edit for various organization patterns of sequence, comparison, contrast, classification, cause and effect, logical flow of ideas through flexible and clear single signal and reference words, point of view, supporting evidence, overall effect, appropriate punctuation and vocabulary. इसका जो नंबर 1 है वो है हमारे पास डेवलप फोकस फॉर own writing by identifying audience and purpose. Select and use a variety of pre-writing strategies such as brainstorming, mind mapping, outlining. नेक्स्ट हमारे पास जो पॉइंट है वो है प्लान ड्राफ्ट एंड रिवाइज राइटिंग टू इंश्योर दैट इट इसका पहला है is focused, purposeful, and reflects insight into the writing situation. Has an organizational pattern that reflects a clear overall progression of ideas through proper use of signal and reference words. Use writing strategies as are appropriate to the purpose of writing. Has varied sentence structure and length, has a good command of language with precision of expression. Proofread and edit their own peers and given text for faulty sentence structure, errors of subject verb agreement, unclear pronoun reference, errors of correction word form, errors of punctuation and spelling. Category Competency 3 Oral communication skill. Standard 1 है इसका all students will use appropriate social and academic conventions of spoken discourse for effective oral communication with individuals and in groups in both informal and formal settings. Benchmark 1 है इसका use extended linguistic exponents to communicate appropriately for various functions and co-functions of advice, house fairs, queries in extended social environment. इसका जो पॉइंट नंबर 1 है वो हमारे पास है select and use appropriate expression for various functions, ask and respond to questions of academic and social nature, ask and express preferences, emotions, wishes, needs and requirements by giving reasons, express satisfaction, dissatisfaction, approval, disapproval and agreement, disagreement fully and partially, politely, express hopes and fears, express refusal politely, seek and offer advice, express personal needs, feelings, emotions and ideas. बेंचमार्क 2 है इसका demonstrate through formal talks, group oral presentations, informal interviews, the social and academic conventions and dynamics to communicate information ideas. इसका पॉइंट नंबर 1 है demonstrate heightened awareness of conventions and dynamics of group discussion and interaction, offer and response to greetings, compliments, invitations, introductions and farewells, demonstrate an understanding of ways to show gratitude, apology, anger and impatience, ask, restate and simplify directions and instructions, present and explain one's point of view clearly, support or modify one's opinion with reasons, acknowledge others' contributions, agree and disagree politely at appropriate times, share information and ideas clearly and restate information and ideas, modify a statement made by a peer, exhibit appropriate conventions of interruptions, negotiate solutions to problems, interpersonal misunderstandings and disputes, express humor through verbal and non-verbal means, summarize the main points of discussion for the benefit of the whole group, join in a group response at the appropriate time, use polite forms to negotiate and reach consensus. Identify and analyze appropriate expressions and interviewing techniques to conduct and give short interviews of a friend or relative on specific topics. Introduce self and others. Prepare and ask relevant questions for an interview. Give appropriate responses using reciprocal ability. Make notes of the responses in an interview. Respond appropriately and effectively to questions. Use language that is appropriate. Demonstrate sensitivity and respect to others. Compile the oral responses of the interview in a written form. Create and deliver simple group class presentation on various themes, problems, and issues. Negotiate verbally to identify roles in preparations for presentation. Present and explain one's point of view clearly. Support or modify one's opinion with reasons. Acknowledge others' contribution. Present with clarity the Present with clarity the main point or subject of the presentation. Support the topic or subject with effective factual information. Structure ideas and arguments in a coherent logical fashion. Exhibit appropriate etiquettes of interacting with audience. Demonstrate appropriate conventions for use of various audio-visual aids. नेक्स्ट हमारे पास इसके साथ एवेलुएट टू कॉमन orally on the presentation of peers against a pre-developed student teacher criteria. Clear and cohesive main idea, consistent organization of ideas, sufficient supporting detail, effective speaking style, appropriate body language, dress and posture, suitable tone, appropriate interaction with audience, appropriate selection and use of audiovisual aids. इसके बाद हमारे पास शुरू होता है competency 4. Competency 4 formal and lexical aspects of language. Standard 1 है pronunciation. All students will understand and articulate widely acceptable pronunciation, stress and information pattern of the English language for approved communication. Benchmark 1 है इसका pronounce new words and use appropriate stress and intonation pattern in sustained speech to communicate effectively. इसका हमारे पास यहाँ पर पहला पॉइंट है use the pronunciation key to pronounce words with developing accuracy. Recognize silent letters in words and pronounce them with developing accuracy. Recognize pronouns and represent primary and secondary stress in words. Refer to a dictionary if required. Recognize and use varying intonation patterns as adds in spoken and written discourse to show attitude, highlight focus in meaning, divide speech into thought groups. इसके बाद हमारे पास है competency for formal and lexical aspects of language. Standard 2 है vocabulary. All students will enhance vocabulary for effective communication. Benchmark 1 है इसका analyze different kind of text to identify how lexical items are used to convey different meanings. Use lexical items in context and with correct spellings. Use lexical items to show different meanings in their own speech and writing. इसका पॉइंट नंबर 1 है enhance and use appropriate vocabulary and correct spelling in speech and writing. Illustrate the use of dictionary for finding appropriate meaning and correct spellings. Use a thesaurus to locate the synonym closest to the meaning of the given word in the context. Examine and interpret transitional devices that show comparison, contrast, reason, concession, condition, emphasis. Deduce the meaning of unfamiliar words from the context using contextual clues. Analyze and understand common roots and use that knowledge to recognize the meaning of new words. Analyze and understand common prefixes and suffixes. Use that knowledge to determine the meaning of unfamiliar words. Understand connotations and denotations. Explore the use of synonyms with varying shades of meaning used for various purposes. For example, propaganda, irony, parody, and satire. Examine and focus the vocabulary that indicates the writer's attitude. Recognize words that vary in meaning according to their connotations. Use appropriate connotation in their own writing. Identify and avoid verbosity. Use one word situation. Eliminate redundancy. Show cultural and gender sensitivity by making appropriate adjustments in language for social, academic, and daily life situations. Formal and lexical aspects of language. Standard 3 है grammar and structure. All students will understand grammatical functions and use the principle of grammar, punctuation, and syntax for developing accuracy in their spoken and written communication. इसका benchmark 1 है recognize grammatical functions and aspects of tense and aspect, selected transitional devices and modal verbs and use them in their speech and writing. इसका जो पॉइंट नंबर 1 है वो है nouns, noun phrases and clauses. Demonstrate use of more collective, countable and uncountable material and abstract nouns. Apply rules of change of number of nouns learned earlier. Recognize and demonstrate use of some nouns that change meaning in the plural form. Pronouns. Illustrate the use of pronouns learned earlier. Identify and demonstrate use of relative pronoun. Recognize the rules for using indefinite pronoun. Illustrate the use of pronoun antecedent agreement. Illustrate use of anaphoric and cataphoric references. Articles. Apply rules for use of a, an, and the wherever applicable in speech and writing. Tenses. Illustrate use of tenses learned earlier. Identify change the form of and use present and past perfect continuous tenses. नेक्स्ट हमारे पास इसके साथ है adjectives and adjective phrases and clauses. Classify adjectives into different types. Change and use degrees of adjectives. Follow order of adjectives in sentences. Form adjectives from nouns and verbs. Use adjective phrases and clauses. Adverbs and adverbials. Illustrate use of adverbs learned earlier. Recognize varying position of adverbs in sentences according to their kinds and importance. Identify and use degrees of comparison of adverbs. Use adverbial phrases and clauses. Prepositions and prepositional phrases. Use prepositional phrases and clauses. transitional devices. Use transitional devices learned earlier. Benchmark 3 है इसका. Recognize and use punctuation including use of commas in phrases, complex clauses and sentences. Recognize and use comma to separate a subordinate clause which precedes a main clause. A non-defining relative clause. Coordinate clauses joined by one of the pure conjunctions. Recognize and use colon to separate independent clauses when there is a sharp antithesis. Recognize and use semicolon between part of a compound sentence when no conjunction is used. The clauses of a compound sentence before conjunctive adverbs. Recognize and use quotation marks to enclose both parts of an interrupted quotation. Unusual or peculiar terms to which attention is directed to make the meaning clearer. Recognize and use hyphen to indicate the division of a word at the end of a line. Recognize and use dash as a separator to indicate that a sentence has been broken off or to indicate a new direction of thought. Recognize and use parentheses around brackets to enclose numbers or letters in enumeration in the text. Express an amount in numbers previously expressed in words. Mark of explanatory or supplementary material. Recognize and use omission marks or ellipses to signify the omission or deletion of letters or words in sentences. Benchmark 3 है analyze sentences types and structure. Recognize and apply the concept and function of coordination and subordination. Extend it writing tasks. Sentence structure. Analyze sentences for clauses and phrases. Identify and differentiate between main, subordinate and relative clause. Types of sentences. Classify, use, convert and make declarative, interrogative, exclamatory and imperative sentences. Identify and differentiate between simple, compound and complex sentences. Use conditional sentences. Recognize the rule of and change the narration of statements, requests, orders and questions. Competency 5. Appropriate ethical and social development standard 1 है इसका. All students will develop ethical and social attributes and values relevant in a multicultural civilized society. Please note this competency will be developed and incorporated across the other 4 competencies. Hence, the teaching and learning of the appropriate values and attributes is to be embedded in the chosen themes and topics of the reading texts, and through writing and speaking activities performed in the learning environment of the class. Benchmark 1 Hiska recognize and practice values and attributes such as tolerance, humanism, patience, equity, justice, honesty, empathy, etc., relevant for peaceful coexistence between individuals, groups, and notations. Benchmark to have develop and portray through actions a sense of importance of individual worth, simultaneously valuing diversity and equality among people. Understand and evaluate contemporary social, economic, and scientific developments issues so as to participate in the global society as aware and thinking individuals.